Yo, what's up, everybody? Professor V here, and welcome to the Positive Psychology Chapter 2 lecture on emotion, motivation, and the nature of well being. Let's go. In Chapter 1, we introduce positive psychology as the scientific study of well being, strengths, happiness, resilience, meaning, and human flourishing. We discuss that the idea that psychology should not only study distress and dysfunction, but also the conditions that help people live as well. In this lecture, we are going to move deeper into one of the engines of well being, emotion. Let's begin with an analogy. Imagine your mind as a car dashboard. On that dashboard, you have many different lights and gauges. Some lights warn you that something needs attention, like the check engine light. Some gauges tell you about your current condition, like speed, fuel, or temperature. Some indicators help you decide what to do next, like turn signals or navigation alerts. Now imagine someone saying, I only want the pleasant light. I only want the dashboard to show me the good news. That sounds nice, but it would be dangerous. You need the warning lights as well. You need to know when the engine is overheating, when the fuel is low, or when something requires maintenance. The goal is not to remove half the dashboard. The goal is to understand what the signals mean and use them wisely. Emotions work in a very similar way. Positive emotions matter, but so do negative emotions. Happiness, joy, interest, fear, anger, sadness, anxiety, gratitude, and pride are not random decorations floating around in the brain. They are signals. They shape attention, motivation, memory, relationships, decision making, health, and behavior. In this chapter, we will explore emotion, motivation, and the nature of well being. We will examine how emotions are recognized and positive and negative effect are classified, how well being is measured, what the brain and genetics have to do with happiness, how motivation influences well being, how goals shape behavior, why we are often bad at predicting our future feelings, and how positive emotions can broaden our thinking and help us recover from stress. Let's begin with universal emotions. In the 1970s, Paul Ekman and Wallace Friesen conducted influential work on facial expressions and emotion. They developed the Facial Action Coding System, often abbreviated as FACS, to measure facial muscle activity. Using this system, they examined facial expressions associated with emotion, such as happiness, anger, sadness, fear, and disgust. Their research suggested that certain emotional expressions are recognized across cultures at rates greater than chance. For example, people from different cultural backgrounds could often match a smile with happiness or a wrinkled nose with disgust. This led Ekman and colleagues to argue that some emotional expressions may be universal, but this is where the story becomes more nuanced. Universal does not mean identical everywhere. Recognition rates differ across cultures. For example, the reading states that a smile that was associated with happiness by a very high percentage of US participants, but that percentage was lower among Sumatran participants. Similarly, US participants recognize a disgust expression at higher rates than Japanese participants. Why does this matter? Because emotions are biological, but they are also cultural. Culture shapes display rules, which are norms about when, where, and how emotions should be expressed. For example, in some cultures, openly showing anger may be discouraged because it disrupts harmony. In others, direct emotional expression may be interpreted as honesty or confidence. The reading gives a fascinating example. Biting one's tongue can signal embarrassment in India, while in the United States, it does not usually carry the same emotional meaning. Culture also affects where people look when interpreting emotion. People from the United States may focus more on the mouth, while people from Japan may focus more on the eyes. Think about emojis for a second. In many Western style smiley faces, the mouth carries much of the emotional signal. Happy mouth, sad mouth, surprised mouth. In many East Asian emoticons, the eyes often carry more of the emotional signal. The tiny punctuation marks are doing cultural gymnastics. The lesson is that emotions are not just private feelings trapped inside one's person's head. They are also social signals. They help us communicate, coordinate, connect, avoid danger, and interpret others. But we have to be careful not to assume that emotional expression means exactly the same thing in every cultural context. Let's discuss the classification of affect. Affect refers broadly to emotional experience. For a long time, many people assumed that positive affect and negative affect were opposite ends of one single dimension. In that view, being high in positive emotion would automatically mean being low in negative emotion, and being high in negative emotion would automatically mean being low in positive emotion. But Watson and colleagues challenged this assumption. Their work suggested that positive affect and negative affect are relatively independent. In other words, you could feel both positive and negative emotions at the same time. This might sound odd at first, but is actually very common. Think about graduation. A student walking across the stage may feel pride, joy, excitement, and relief. At the same time, that student may also feel sadness about leaving friends, anxiety about the future, and uncertainty about what comes next. The emotional system is not a light switch, it is more like a mixing board. You can be excited and nervous before a job interview. You can be grateful and exhausted as a parent. You can feel relief and grief after ending a relationship that was unhealthy but meaningful. You can enjoy college while also feeling overwhelmed by deadlines. This two dimensional view of affect matters for positive psychology because it helps us avoid oversimplifying well being. A happy life does not mean a life without negative emotions. A meaningful life may include emotional complexity. Sometimes the most important experiences are emotionally mixed. Graduations, weddings, moving away from home, becoming a caregiver, changing careers, or saying goodbye. Now that we have discussed emotion, we need to ask a research question. How do we measure well being? In psychology, anything we study must be measured in some way. If we want to study stress, we must measure stress. If we want to study motivation, we must measure motivation. If we want to study happiness and well being, we need tools for measurement. The readings distinguish subjective and objective measures of well being. Subjective measures are based on a person's own evaluation of their life and experiences. These include surveys, questionnaires, interviews, and self reports. For example, a questionnaire might ask, all things considered, how satisfied are you with your life as a whole? Or it might ask participants to rate statements such as, the conditions of my life are excellent. These global assessments are useful because they are quick, easy to administer, and can be used with large groups. But they have limitations. People are not always accurate reporters of their past emotional experiences. Memory is not a perfect recording device. It is more like a messy group project between actual experiences, interpretation, mood, identity, and the last thing that happened before the survey. For example, imagine a student is asked, How happy were you this semester? If they answer right after receiving a poor exam grade, they may rate the whole semester more negatively. If they answer right after a fun night with friends, they may rate it more positively. Their answer may reflect the current emotional weather more than the whole semester climate. This is why researchers sometimes use the experience sampling method. In experience sampling, participants are signaled multiple times per day, often through a phone, and asked what are they doing, who are they with, and how they are feeling in the moment. This method captures life as it's being lived, instead of asking someone to reconstruct a whole week from memory. It asks them to report their experience close to the actual moment. The benefit is accuracy. The drawback is that it's demanding. Participants have to respond repeatedly throughout the day, which can be time consuming and disruptive. A compromise is the day reconstruction method. In this approach, participants break the previous day into episodes, such as eating breakfast, commuting, attending class, working, exercising, or studying. Then they report what they were doing, who they were with, where they were, and how they felt during each episode. The day reconstruction method gives researchers more detail than a global questionnaire, but it is less disruptive than experience sampling. It is like asking someone to replay yesterday in chapters instead of summarizing the whole novel in one sentence. Researchers may also use objective measures of well-being. Objective measures are external indicators that can be observed or verified. These might include income, employment status, housing quality, crime rates, health indicators, life expectancy, or reports from friends and family. Objective measures are valuable because they are not entirely dependent on self-reports, but they also have limits. A person may have high income, stable housing, and good health care, yet still feel lonely or dissatisfied. On the other hand, a person may have fewer material resources but experience strong meaning, close relationships, and emotional fulfillment. For this reason, researchers often benefit from using both subjective and objective measures. Subjective measures tell us how people experience their lives from the inside. Objective measures tell us about external conditions that shape quality of life. Together, they provide a fuller picture. Now let's turn to the biological correlates of happiness. Positive psychology is not only about thoughts and feelings in an abstract sense. Well-being also has biological foundations. Research in neuroscience has identified several brain areas associated with happiness, reward, motivation, and positive emotion. One important region is the left prefrontal cortex. Studies using fMRIs have found increased activity in this region during positive emotional experiences and during activities that elicit happiness, such as recalling pleasant memories. Another important area is the ventral striatum, especially the nucleus accumbens. The nucleus accumbens is part of the brain's reward system. It plays a role in pleasure, reward, motivation, and wanting. It contains many dopamine receptors, and dopamine is closely associated with motivation and reward seeking. This is why the nucleus accumbens is involved when people respond to rewarding stimuli such as food, social interaction, and money. It helps explain why motivation and emotion are so tightly connected. We do not simply think our way towards goals. We are pulled, nudged, tempted, and energized by reward systems in the brain. But here's the hopeful part. The brain is not fixed like concrete. It is more like a living city, constantly rewiring roads, strengthening pathways, and responding to experience. This capacity is called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity refers to the brain's ability to change structurally and functionally across our life. Our experiences can shape the brain. Mindfulness and meditation practices, for example, have been linked to changes in brain areas involved in attention, self regulation, and emotional awareness. This does not mean a person can simply meditate once and become a happiness wizard by Thursday. Real brain change usually requires repeated practice, but it does mean that well being is not only something we inherit or stumble into. It is partly something we can cultivate through experience and intentional activity. That brings us to genetic correlates of happiness. Behavioral genetics research often compares identical twins and fraternal twins. Identical twins share 100% of their genes, while fraternal twins share about 50% on average. If identical twins are more similar in happiness than fraternal twins, researchers infer that genetics play a role. The readings also state that across multiple studies, happiness has been estimated to be about 40 to 50% heritable. Other research has examined stability and happiness across time and found that the stability of happiness may also be strongly influenced by genetics. This connects to the idea of a happiness set point. Some researchers argue that people may have a baseline level of happiness they tend to return to over time, even after positive or negative life events. But be careful with this idea. Heritable does not mean unchangeable. Height is highly heritable, but nutrition still matters. Musical ability may have genetic influences, but practice still matters. Happiness may have genetic influences, but relationships, habits, goals, environments, and coping strategies still matter. So, rather than saying some people are just born happy and the rest are doomed, a more accurate interpretation is biology matters, but it is not the whole story. This leads us to an important distinction: state versus trait. A state is temporary. It reflects how someone feels in a particular moment or situation. Your current anxiety level, your mood this morning, or your happiness after receiving good news are states. A trait is more stable. It reflects enduring patterns across time and situations. Personality traits like extroversion, conscientiousness, agreeableness, openness, and neuroticism are examples. Well being includes both state like and trait like features. A person may be generally satisfied with life, which reflects trait level well being, but still have a terrible Tuesday, which reflects state level well being. Another person may generally struggle with low mood, but still experiences moments of joy, connection, and peace. This matters because different factors influence states and traits. State well being might be affected by sleep, weather, a recent grade, a conversation, or a stressful commute. Trait well being may be more influenced by personality, culture, long term relationships, values, and repeated habits. Now let's shift to motivation. Motivation is the force that moves behavior. It answers the question, why do we do what we do? The reading distinguishes intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation occurs when we engage in an activity because the activity itself is satisfying. For example, reading because you enjoy learning, playing music because it feels meaningful, exercising because you enjoy the movement, or helping someone because it feels personally valuable. Extrinsic motivation occurs when we engage in an activity because of external rewards or pressures. For example, studying only for a grade, working only for money, volunteering only to build a resume, or completing an assignment only to avoid punishment. Now, extrinsic motivation is not automatically bad. Grades, paychecks, praise, scholarships, and deadlines all matter. Many students would probably not write a research paper just for the warm sparkle of APA formatting. External motivators can help us begin and persist. But positive psychology is interested in the quality of motivation. Are people acting from interest, value, and purpose, or are they acting only from pressure, fear, or reward? Self-determination theory developed by Deci and Ryan argues that well-being and optimal motivation are supported by three basic psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy means feeling that your behavior is self-directed and aligned with your values. It does not mean doing whatever you want at every moment. It means feeling a sense of ownership over your choices. Competence means feeling capable and effective. People need to feel that they can learn, improve, and meet challenges. Relatedness means feelings connected to others. Human beings are deeply social. We are not emotional houseplants that thrive in isolation with occasional sunlight. When autonomy, competence, and relatedness are met, people are more likely to experience well-being and sustained motivation. Consider two students taking the same course. Student A says, "I'm only taking this because I have to. I hate the material. I just need the grade." Student B, on the other hand, says, "This course is challenging, but I can see how it connects to my future career, and I like understanding people better." Both students may complete the work, but student B is more likely to experience deeper motivation because the work feels connected to personal meaning. The readings also discuss a study by Ariely and colleagues involving Lego Bionicles. Participants were paid to build Lego figures. In the meaningful condition, their completed figures were displayed in front of them. In the meaningless condition, the experimenter disassembled each figure right after it was completed and gave the participants the same pieces to rebuild. Even though participants were paid, those in the meaningful condition built more figures. This suggests that meaning matters for motivation. People are willing to work harder when their effort feels visible, purposeful, or connected to a result. This has obvious workplace implications. If employees feel their work is pointless, ignored, or immediately undone, motivation decreases. But if people can see the value of their efforts, they are often more engaged, even when rewards are modest. Now, let's discuss goals. A goal is a mental representation of a desired outcome and the means to achieve it. For example, earn a college degree includes a desired outcome such as graduating or getting a better job, and a set of means such as studying, attending class, managing time, and resisting distractions. Goals help organize the behavior. They give direction. Without goals, motivation becomes foggy. It is difficult to move intentionally when you do not know what you are moving towards. And the readings distinguish approach and avoidance goals. Approach goals are focused on moving towards a desired outcome. For example, I want to earn an A because I want to master the material. Or, I want to exercise 3 times a week because I want to feel stronger. Avoidance goals are focused on preventing an undesired outcome. For example, I do not want to fail, or I want to avoid disappointing my family, or I do not want to embarrass myself. Both types of goals can motivate behavior, but they often feel different psychologically. Approach goals are usually associated with hope, enthusiasm, curiosity, and engagement. Avoidance goals are often associated with fear, anxiety, pressure, and stress. Imagine 2 students studying for the same exam. One says, I want to understand this material because it will help me become a stronger psychology major. The other says, I have to study because I cannot fail or I'll ruin everything. Both may study, but the emotional fuel is different. One is moving towards growth, the other is running from disaster. Avoidance motivation can be useful in the short term. Fear can get us moving. But if our entire life is built around avoiding failure, we may become chronically anxious and less satisfied. Good goals have several characteristics. First, good goals are achievable. They should stretch us but remain realistic. I will become fluent in my new language by next Friday is not a goal. It is a stress grenade wearing a tiny academic hat. Second, good goals are specific. Get healthier is vague. Walk for 30 minutes 4 times per week is clearer. Third, goals need to be measurable. If you cannot track progress, it is harder to know whether you are improving. Raise my grade by completing all weekly quizzes before Sunday night is measurable. Fourth, good goals are meaningful. They should connect to values, interests, identity, or purpose. A goal that looks impressive but feels empty may not support well-being. Fifth, good goals often include sub-goals. Large goals can feel overwhelming, but sub-goals break them into manageable steps. Writing a 10-page paper becomes less frightening when broken into choosing a topic, finding sources, creating an outline, writing 2 pages, revising, and proofreading. Sub-goals create small wins, and small wins matter because they build momentum and competence. Now let's move to effective forecasting and impact bias. Effective forecasting refers to predicting how we will feel in the future. We do this constantly. We think, if I get this job, I'll be happy. If I fail this exam, I'll be devastated. If I move to that city, I'll love it. If this relationship ends, I'll never recover. Sometimes we are right, often we are not. The readings discuss a study by Dunn, Wilson, and Gilbert involving Harvard dorm assignments. Students predicted how satisfied they would be with their dorm rooms before moving in. Some dorms were more desirable than others. Later, researchers assessed students' actual satisfaction. Students tended to overestimate how much their dorm assignment would affect their happiness. They did not fully account for psychological adjustments. People adapt. They make friends. They develop routines. They find new favorite spots. The room that seemed like emotional dorm in August may become fine, actually, by October. This error is called impact bias. Impact bias is the tendency to overestimate the intensity and duration of future emotional reactions. Impact bias matters because it can make us overly fearful of negative events and overly confident that positive events will transform our lives. We may think a bad grade will ruin us forever or that a new purchase will permanently elevate our mood, but humans adapt more than we expect. This connects to resilience. It does not mean bad events are painless. It means we are often better at adjusting than we predict. Now let's return to positive emotions. Positive emotions are not just pleasant ornaments. They can serve important psychological functions. Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory argues that positive emotions broaden our thinking and behavior. Negative emotions often narrow attention. Fear prepares us to escape. Anger prepares us to confront. Anger prepares us to confront. Disgust prepares us to reject or avoid. These responses can be useful when dealing with immediate threats. Positive emotions work differently. Joy, interest, gratitude, and contentment signal safety and possibility. They open our attention. They make us more likely to explore, connect, play, learn, and create. This broadened mindset can build long term resources. For example, interests may lead a student to explore a new field, which builds knowledge. Joy may encourage play, which builds social bonds. Gratitude may strengthen relationships. Calm may improve self regulation. Hirsch and Anderson used the Remote Associates Test, a creativity task where participants must identify a word connecting three seemingly unrelated words. Participants in a positive emotional state perform better than those in neutral or negative states. This supports the idea that positive emotions can broaden cognitive flexibility and creativity. For students, this matters. Positive emotions can help with learning. Curiosity, interest, and enjoyment can make the mind more flexible. That does not mean students must be happy every second to learn, but it does mean that emotional climate affects cognitive performance. Fredrickson also proposed the undoing hypothesis. This idea suggests that positive emotions can help undo or reduce physiological effects of negative emotions. When people experience stress or fear, the body becomes activated. Heart rate increases, blood pressure rises, muscles tense, and the body prepares for action. Positive emotions may help the body return to baseline more quickly. In another study, participants completed a stressful task involving an impromptu speech. Afterwards, they watched films designed to elicit different emotions such as joy, neutrality, or sadness. Participants who watched positive films showed faster cardiovascular recovery than those in neutral or sad conditions. This is important because positive emotions may support emotional regulation and stress resilience. They do not erase stress, but they may help the body recover. Think about what happens after a hard day. A funny conversation with a friend, a peaceful walk, a favorite song, or a moment of gratitude may not solve the problem, but it can help the nervous system exhale. Positive emotions can be a psychological reset button, but not because it denies difficulty, but because it helps the body and mind recover from it. Let's discuss emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence refers to the ability to recognize, understand, manage, and use emotions effectively in oneself and others. It matters for relationships, decision making, motivation, leadership, conflict, resolution, and well being. Salavi and Mayer introduced the concept and described several domains of emotional intelligence. First, emotional intelligence involves knowing one's own emotions. This means recognizing what you are feeling as it occurs. A person with strong emotional awareness might say, I am not just angry, I am embarrassed and defensive because I felt criticized. That level of awareness gives the person more options. Second, emotional intelligence includes handling interpersonal relationships well. This involves social skill, communication, and the ability to maintain effective relationships. Third, emotional intelligence involves using emotions to motivate oneself. Emotions can provide energy, hope can sustain effort, pride can reinforce progress, concern can motivate preparation. Even anxiety, when managed well, can signal that something matters and needs attention. Fourth, emotional intelligence includes recognizing emotions in others, and this is closely related to empathy. It means noticing when someone is uncomfortable, disappointed, excited, overwhelmed, or hurt. Fifth, emotional intelligence involves managing emotions. This includes regulating mood, coping with stress, and recovering after emotional setbacks. But here is the subtle point from the readings. High emotional intelligence does not mean extreme emotional control. Too little control can lead to impulsivity, but too much control can lead to repression. If we lock every emotion in a mental basement, eventually something starts rattling the pipes. Healthy emotional regulation means feeling emotions, understanding them, and responding wisely. It is not the same as pretending we are unaffected. Let's bring the dashboard analogy back. Your emotions are dashboard signals. Some are pleasant, some are uncomfortable. Some tell you to connect, some tell you to slow down, and some tell you to pay attention. Some tell you that a need is unmet, a goal matters, or a relationship requires care. Positive psychology does not ask us to rip out the warning lights. It asks us to understand the whole dashboard. We learn how emotions are expressed across cultures, how affect can include both positive and negative dimensions, how well-being can be measured, how biology and genetics contribute to happiness, how motivation and goals shape behavior, how we mispredict future emotions, how positive emotions broaden thinking and aid recovery, and how emotional intelligence helps us use emotions wisely. In the next video, we will move into Chapter 3, which focuses on subjective well-being. We will return to the distinction between subjective and objective measures of happiness, but we will go further by examining how happiness relates to longevity. We will discuss research suggesting that positive emotions may be linked to healthier lives, stronger social connections, better coping, and possibly longer life. Credit to this open educational research content in this lecture goes to the University of Houston downtown professor, Dr. Kit Cho. Thank you for watching, and as you prepare for Chapter 3, keep this question in mind. If emotions are signals, then what are your daily emotions trying to tell you about the life you are building? So until next time, take care and stay curious.